Day 20 of the war with Hamas, and for the first time in the conflict, the IDF staged a targeted raid into northern Gaza with infantry and tanks. The incursion came hours after Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the nation and said that the offensive war near. More from IlTV's Stevelebovich.
Overnight, IDF forces entered northern Gaza for the first time in the 20-day war. Infantry and tanks entered northern Gaza on a probing mission for the next stages of the war, a full ground offensive. The probing forces struck terrorist infrastructure and anti-tank guided missile launching positions. Troops left the area after the raid. The raid came as the intensive bombing campaign in Gaza is continuing with hundreds of strikes on Hamas infrastructure and terrorist fighters. The IDF incursion came hours after Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the nation and said that a ground operation could begin at any time.
אני רוצה להיות ברור. העיתוי של פעולת צה"ל, העיתוי נקבע פה אחד על ידי קבינט ניהול המלחמה, יחד עם הרמטכ"ל, ויחד עם הקבינט אנחנו פועלים כדי להבטיח את התנאים המיטביים ללוחמינו לפעולות הבאות.
The Prime Minister clearly set out the goals of the coming military operation.
אנחנו בעיצומה של מערכה על קיומנו. הצבנו למלחמה שתי מטרות: לחסל את החמאס על ידי השמדת היכולות הצבאיות והשלטוניות שלו, ולעשות כל דבר אפשרי להשיב את החטופים שלנו הביתה.
On the ground in Gaza, IDF strikes are taking their toll, killing hundreds of Hamas terrorists. The massive bombing is paving the way for the coming ground offensive.
אנחנו ממשיכים לתקוף בעזה. היום תקפנו בעיר עזה, תקפנו תשתיות טרור בבניינים, ותקפנו תשתיות טרור מתחת לקרקע. אנחנו נמשיך לתקוף בעזה על מנת להשיג את מטרות המלחמה. כל תקיפה כזאת הולכת ומחזקת אותנו ומשפרת את מצבנו לקראת השלבים הבאים במלחמה.
Hamas, for its part, continues firing rockets into Israel, reaching as far as Eilat in the south and Haifa in the north. Those rockets fell harmlessly in open areas. A rocket did land in the central city of Rishon LeZion, destroying an apartment building and injuring 3 civilians.
There are so many stories from the supernova desert rave coming to light, and it's our duty to let the world know what happened on October 7th over there. And joining me now in studio is Jen LaVine, who went to the party and survived. Can we say survived, Jen? How are you feeling? Thank you for coming to our studio.
First of all, I think it's my honor to be here and to actually tell the story of really what happened and to let the world know what we're doing and what happened there is the way that we can continue to live here in Israel.
Is survive the right word we can describe? Because, you know, we were always so used to say survived about different things, about things that happened in the 40s, you know. Is this something you're feeling these days?
I come from a family that had Holocaust survivors, and I think it's a very tough situation to be put in, that I can't compare myself to somebody running from the Nazis, running from Hamas terrorists, but I think it's something inside myself that I still have to kind of acknowledge, which I haven't, but we will in the future.
Of course. Now, I want to start how it started for you. We all know the famous rocket barrel at 6:30 in the morning during the party. How did it all start for you over there?
So it actually started at 6:30, around 6:30. I don't really know the specific times. And we continued dancing outside. We are kind of used to these kind of situations where there's a little bit of a missile attack.
I'm stopping you for a second. You know, it's crazy to think people abroad have to understand. Rockets are something we're already kind of used to,
right,
in a way, which is crazy to think about.
Right.
Yes.
I actually come from the search and rescue unit, so it's something that we are really used to actually go under burn down buildings and to save civilians. And we actually thought that, okay, it's a little bit of a missile attack and it's kind of like our day-to-day life there down south. And after we actually thought that after 30 minutes of something being kind of wrong, we started trying to leave the area of the party. And that's when we first encountered the ambush that we got into. I don't want to go down to specifics, but at first we tried to cross the 232 road that was leading
The death
east.
road, actually.
Yeah,
We know it today.
Yeah, what you call the death road. And that's where we got ambushed. That was still somewhere that we were inside our cars. And at some point, people got jammed and there was no way of fleeing by car, so we got down on foot. I was with 5 friends and 5 combat soldiers.
Where are they now?
Each of them are doing their reserves.
They all survived.
Yes, they all survived. We're all good. And at that point, we found ourselves kind of trying to treat people that were injured.
So that's important to say because we spoke before the show and you told me that you didn't flee. You stayed there to treat people, to injured people. At that point, did you already understand how bad the situation was? I mean, because many people say we didn't really understand how bad it was. We thought like 2 terrorists, which is bad enough, of course, but there were hundreds.
Right. No, we didn't know. We didn't have any internet connection, so we didn't get some kind of like information from the news or anything. We just heard gunfire and we saw people falling and we saw people getting shot. And that's at the same point where people are shooting at us and getting kidnapped. And it's, I think, a feeling that I will have to take on to the rest of my life, that I left injured people out on the field where
You couldn't do anything, Erin. You really couldn't. Is there any moment that stayed in your mind till now, someone specific you remember, any specific moment you wanna tell us about?
A lot of them. A lot of the people. Because we in the army, we are trained to that no one gets left behind. And when somebody needs our help, we help them. And to have that feeling in your mind that you went out for a party to celebrate the life and love and peace, and to come back and to see those horrific things and to trying to
Cope.
to cope and to take action, but to leave people behind is something that is not in our DNA.
Of course. Yarin, is there any message you'd like to convey to the world, to our viewers? I mean, we see the sharp switch. You're sitting here with your uniform. You were called to reserves. I mean, between all the trauma, any message you have to spread, really, to say?
Yes. First of all, I went to reserves. I got back on that same Saturday at 4:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. I already went to reserves.
Wow.
Because I felt it was my duty, not from hatred, but from the knowing that we have to continue on. And this is, I think, the place for the world to actually know that it has a chance to pick a side. Either it wants to fight terror or to continue living under terror. And I think that taking our side and taking the choice of really heading on and to listening to our side of the story is the right thing to do.
Totally true. And this is another battle we're fighting these days, the battle of the world arena, you know, foreign press. We had an interview about it this week, fighting really what the world think of Israel and how the world perceives Israel. So Yarin, thank you so much for coming. Stay safe. And it was a real honor to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cross-border clashes continue on the northern border as IDF successfully took out several more Hezbollah cells firing rockets into Israel. This as it remains unclear whether Hezbollah will fully enter the war when Israel presses its planned offensive into Gaza. And IlTV Stevelebovich has more.
The IDF is carrying out airstrikes against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon as missile and rocket attacks on northern Israel continue. One cell was preparing an attack near the northern community of Dovev and was struck by an IDF drone, and another near al-Arouri was struck by IDF tanks, and a third that fired a missile toward Israeli forces near Avivim. 4 rockets were launched from Lebanon at the largely evacuated northern city of Kiryat Shmona. They landed in open areas, causing no injuries or damage. Meanwhile, Syrian media report an alleged Israeli airstrike against Aleppo International Airport, causing damage to the runway. This marks the 4th time the runway in Aleppo had been hit in recent weeks, as Israel steps up efforts to prevent the shipment of advanced weapons from Iran to Hezbollah. The army says that they are not off limits to attack.
במזרח התיכון, שהשלוחים, הפרוקסי, כפי שהם מכונים על ידי איראן, פועלים מעיראק, תימן ולבנון, ההנחיות מגיעות רק ממקום אחד, מאיראן. מי שמערער את המזרח התיכון עבור מעשי חמאס דאעש הנפשעים, שלא יתחבא.
Meeting in Beirut with Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah voiced support for the Gaza terrorists, but has yet to give clear signs that he would fully enter the war when Israel presses its offensive into Gaza.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
We're now joined by our very own IlTV correspondent, Stevelebovich, to wrap up all the latest security updates. Steve, day 20 of the war and the first IDF incursion into Gaza with tanks and infantry. Is this a sign that the coming ground offensive is near upon us?
I have to say that I believe it is. There's been 20 days almost of pounding of Gaza, of laying the ground for opportune efforts of the artillery, of the infantry, and of tanks to move into Gaza in a significant way. These are probing efforts right now, just going short distances beyond the border, just checking out for traps, wanting to make sure that the soldiers have as easy a way in as possible. The large operation will be totally different than what you're seeing now, though.
You know, one of the main questions you're hearing in studios these days is, what's the deadline? I mean, is there even a deadline for a ground operation now?
Look, I think many of us, including most of the soldiers on the front, would like to have seen it start by now. Our military leaders say that they're ready. The political echelon needs a little bit more time just to prepare for the entry. The Prime Minister has made it very clear it's happening. The Defense Minister said the same. Everyone's ready to go. It's happening. It's just a matter of days. I just want to remind people that back in '67, before the Six-Day War, when we were facing three enemies, three states, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, there was about a 21-day period before the war actually began, and Israel surprised them and defeated all the enemies and captured all that territory. 21 days, that would be tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised, but I also wouldn't bet on it.
Of course, we all agree it has to be done in a smart way. Now, Steve, Israel has been telling Gaza residents to head south for their safety, and the IDF efforts would begin in northern Gaza. Without giving away any military secrets, how do you think the battle plan will look?
Well, before I say about the battle plan, let me just say that one thing we know that's going on is that Hamas is standing on the road with guns, preventing people, threatening people, maybe shooting people in order to prevent them from heading south. So the humanitarian disaster that's taking place in Gaza is largely, totally the fault of Hamas. First of all, by starting this war, and now by preventing people from getting to safety. How long will this take? I don't know. I'm hoping it's a matter of 6 days. Wouldn't that be nice if we could win this operation in 6 days? Our leaders are telling us it's going to take a lot longer than that. The country is mobilized, ready, strong. We'll be there. We'll be fighting as long as we need to be fighting. Make no mistake about it. There is going to be a fight. We are going to win. It will take some time. I hope it's quick, and I hope as many of our soldiers as possible will be okay.
Of course, amen. You know, now, Prime Minister Netanyahu also spoke yesterday night. He said the two goals of the war were the defeat of Hamas and the return of the hostages in Gaza. What is Israel's position on the return of the hostages? I mean, is the ground operation on hold as a result? Because many people are talking about the fact that we have to wait before we go in. Of course, not military people, but people want to wait before we go into Gaza because of the hostages.
Look, every one of us, every person in this country is very, very worried about the hostages, to say the least. It's a major national issue. We have to get the hostages back. If the Qataris, and it seems like it's Qatar, everyone is saying so, and they've already arranged two small handovers of 2 women each time. If they can arrange a sizable turnover of women and children and others, you know, I would hope I would think that that would cause us to pause for a few days. It doesn't change the fact that we're going in.
Of course, we're all also waiting for the Red Cross to actually go in, really tell us what's going on. Not us specifically, but the government, what's going on with the hostages. I want to switch and go northward. The exchanges with Hezbollah are continuing, and Nasrallah is still not saying whether he plans to fully enter the war when Israel enters Gaza, but he does seem to be coordinating with Hamas. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's the big question. Yesterday, he had a meeting with them. It was videotaped. A statement was released. They are certainly coordinating with them, but they have not committed to joining the war. The big question is what will happen on the day that Israel launches the major offensive into Gaza? What will Hezbollah do then? Certainly, we have sent warnings about the potential, not only the potential, the fact that Beirut will be hit if there's any offensive launched from Hezbollah. We're fully mobilized on the north. We can fight two wars simultaneously if we need to. It's actually a good time to do so because we're fully mobilized and people are in shelters that need to be. It's not something we're looking to have right now. We certainly are planning to take on first Gaza.
Of course not. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today, and stay safe.
You too.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's controversial remarks in which he declared Hamas as a liberation group and criticized Israel's actions in Gaza have ignited a diplomatic crisis with Israeli officials expressing outrage.
İsrail'in Gazze'ye yönelik saldırıları hem yapanlar hem onu destekleyenler açısından hem katilliğe hem akıl hastalığına delalet eden bir haldir.
Israeli officials are expressing outrage over these comments made by Turkish President Erdogan, which have threatened to strain diplomatic relations between the two nations. Erdogan declared that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, but rather a liberation group fighting to protect its lands. This assertion has deeply upset Israeli authorities, who see it as endorsing violence against Jews. They argued that Erdogan's interpretation of Islam may suggest that killing Jews is acceptable, and his support for Hamas is misguided. The Israeli Foreign Ministry issued a strong condemnation, stating that Hamas is a despicable terrorist organization responsible for intentional acts of violence against civilians, including women, children, and the elderly, and compared Hamas to ISIS. Tensions between Israel and Turkey, which had improved over the past year, now appear to be on the brink of another diplomatic crisis. Israel is taking precautions due to concerns of the safety of its nationals in Turkey. Last week, all Israeli embassy staff in Ankara and the consulate in Istanbul were recalled to Israel in part to preempt any potential provocations by Erdogan, such as the expulsion of Israeli diplomats. Erdogan further escalated the situation by canceling his planned visit to Israel and urged an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He called on Muslim countries to work together for lasting peace, emphasizing the need for Israel to listen to calls for peace. Erdogan also urged the international community to pressure Israel to stop its attacks and advocated for the permanent opening of the Rafah border crossing for humanitarian aid to Gaza. Nearly 30 teddy bears, each blindfolded and bearing pictures of the abducted children in Gaza, are displayed in Tel Aviv these days, serving as a heartbreaking reminder of all the innocent lives held hostage by Hamas. And IlTV's Devo Klein has the story.
Very bad to see the young children. I don't believe it. I don't believe it, really. It's animals, people. How we can do it? To kill child, parents. What can I tell you? I see that and I feel I want to cry.
Nearly 36 teddy bears were displayed in Tel Aviv, each blindfolded and bearing pictures of the abducted children in Gaza. The stuffed animals in shades of brown and white featured images of 30 children, some as young as 9 months old, who are among the 222 individuals currently being held hostage by Hamas.
When I see this, and it reminds me why I'm in the army and what I'm fighting for and what I'm defending. And there's no words that could describe how horrifying this is, seeing innocent kids that did nothing wrong except for being in their homes, in Israel, in their homeland. nothing could be worse than kidnapping and brutally raping, slaughtering, and killing innocent people that did nothing wrong at 7 in the morning in their homes.
The impact of this display was undeniable, with passers-by visibly moved by the sight, many chanting, "Bring them back, bring them back."
You're getting over here and you understand that it's something that happened because of anti-Semitism. It's something that happened because people cannot tolerate it, that we will be over here in Israel. And they don't care if you are a soldier, they don't care if you are a citizen. They just got over here in order to massacre people. You're getting over here and you see these teddy bears, which you know is like a baby's toy, it's a children's toy. And you see how they are blindfolded, they're covering their eyes. You see the ages, you see the smiles, and you cannot stop the tears. I was tearing up over here.
The tragic murders of over 1,400 Israelis caused immense personal tragedy to family members nationwide and indeed around the world. The long process of finding and identifying bodies is still ongoing, and many funerals have been delayed. Funerals held yesterday included 3 members of a British Israeli Sharabi family, and al-TV's Stevelebovich has more.
Relatives and friends gathered in Kfar Harif for the funeral of 3 members of the British Israeli Sharabi family who were murdered in their home in Kibbutz Be'eri during the October 7th infiltration and massacre by Hamas terrorists. Lian Sharabi, along with her daughters Noya and Yahel, were among the 1,400 people murdered when Hamas gunmen rampaged through Israeli towns, shooting men, women, and children, and seizing hostages on October 7th, the worst attack on civilians in Israeli history.
This is what happened when Israel failed, even for just a minute, to protect their citizens. So 3 beautiful girls, 2 girls and their mother should be buried because we failed even for a minute to protect our citizens.
Other family members are missing and presumed dead or taken to Gaza among more than 200 hostages.
We have to bury our dead and at the same time look for the other member of our family, the father of the both Noya and Yael, and their uncle, Yossi.
Leanne, aged 56, was from Bristol, England, and went to Be'eri as a kibbutz volunteer when she was only 19. She met her husband, Eli, and decided to stay. There, she embraced the principles of kibbutz life. Over 1,400 were murdered in Israel on October 7th, and despite the dangers of continuing rocket fire, attendance at funerals swelled, with the entire nation feeling personally connected to the tragedy.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected tonight around the country with lows of around 21 degrees Celsius or 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Bright and sunny skies alongside rising temperatures set to continue throughout the rest of the weekend, reaching highs of 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 1,400 babies, children, elderly, men, women, soldiers were murdered in cold blood by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. The scale of the tragedy is so large that we cannot mention every name right now, but we will slowly share their stories and ensure their memories live on. Not a single Israeli is not impacted by the horrific events of October 7th, and today all of Israel stands together and mourns. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our al-TV channel, subscribe to our al-TV newsletter, and of course, do not forget to check out our new and improved website, iltv.tv, with all of the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm al-Arouri. Have an amazing weekend. Stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.